Well, our top story, the long-awaited Afghanistan Peace Summit has begun in Moscow with delegations from Afghan government and the Taliban in attendance. The summit is the latest attempt to end the conflict in Afghanistan and to map a future for the country after the withdrawal of the US troops. Notably, this is the first time that Taliban's political wing based in Doha is participating in the peace talks as well.
Dear colleagues, all the countries face threats from international terrorism, one of the targets of which is Afghanistan. Terrorists, represented by Islamic State, not without support of external sponsors, are taking steps to turn Afghanistan into the foothold of their expansion into Central Asia and our wider region as a whole. It is the aim of all countries and all active structures in the region to help Afghanistan uproot this terrorist threat.
And India, which is participating in the summit at a non-official level, said that it was in support of all efforts at peace and reconciliation in Afghanistan. The summit is being held after much delay. Now, Moscow had proposed to hold the multilateral summit, peace talks in August this year, but the meeting was postponed after the Afghan President Ashraf Ghani rejected the invitation on the grounds that talks with Taliban should be led by Kabul. New Delhi says it is committed to the Afghan peace process. Let's listen in to what the Foreign Ministry had to say.
It was decided by the Government of India that our participation will be at the non-official level. Now, beyond this, I really can't get into the details as to why it was at this level. There are a lot of factors which goes into taking a decision. This time, it was the considered decision of the Government of India that we will participate at a non-official level. In our policy on Afghanistan, which we have articulated and which has been consistent for quite some time now, that we will be supportive of any process in Afghanistan where Afghanistan is a participant, they are party to that process, and they also have a stake in the process, which means that any process which is Afghan-led, Afghan-owned and Afghan-driven.
And joining us to talk a little bit more about the Moscow-led peace talks in Afghanistan is Dan Ashby, who joins us from Moscow. Also joining us is Dilip Sinha, former Indian diplomat and ambassador, joining us from New Delhi. Dan Ashby, if I can come to you first in Moscow, how hopeful is Russia of a positive outcome of engaging with the Taliban, and how does this pitch Russia vis-a-vis the US, which also has initiated separate dialogue processes with the Taliban but hasn't yielded much?
Yes, exactly. I think already this is being seen as a success in Moscow, just because, as you've already said, this is unprecedented in a way. They have managed to get the High Peace Council, which is backed by the Afghan government, here in Moscow, Taliban representatives as well, and then you have the likes of the Foreign Minister of Russia talking about trying to achieve a indivisible territorial integrity to try get a peace and give some hope to the Afghan people. So Russia sees this as a success, to be showing its global influence and getting these two parties to talks, particularly, as you said, when we know that the US has been trying to do the same, or at least there appears to be some talks on the US side. The question is, though, whether this can achieve what they hope it will achieve and go on to have more substantive talks, more negotiating. The Taliban, of course, came out with this statement saying they weren't negotiating, even though they came here seeking peace. And there are some fears that perhaps the Taliban, the Afghan Representative Council, have come here to get talks going, but they will really do the meaningful negotiations with the US side, of course, who have the 14,000 troops in Afghanistan. But even so, I think Moscow sees this first step as a success.
Right. Dan, stay with us. Ambassador Sinha, how do you see this playing out in Afghanistan? As Dan Ashby was saying, that there are conditionalities as well from the Taliban side. They want the US troop withdrawal as well. So this is, of course, in a sense, many would suggest that the US as presence in Afghanistan, of course, has not helped, and Moscow is now playing a bigger role in the last 2 years, particularly since the Taliban's footprint has once again increased.
Yes, with its relative success in Syria, Moscow is now turning its attention towards Afghanistan, and as under President Donald Trump, the US withdraws from various international activities, concentrating on certain aspects of its foreign policy. Moscow sees this as an opportunity to try and see if it can get the various Afghan factions together. Now, unfortunately, we find that in the case of Russia now, there is a commonality of interest between Russia, the Taliban, and Pakistan, with the Taliban backed by Pakistan, in that they all want the Americans out of Afghanistan. So that is what their attempt is, to try and see if they can put pressure on the Afghan government to accept the Taliban in some role in the Afghan government.
Right.
Now, I'm not sure if the Taliban are committed at all to peace efforts. They have certainly not shown any desire to participate in the electoral process in Afghanistan or to join the form the government according to the constitution of Afghanistan. They have not only been boycotting elections, they have actually been attacking elections.
Right.
Now, that does not augur well for the future of Afghanistan or for this process.
Right. And so, Dan Ashby, the question there then would be, what is the kind of mandate that this peace process would have, considering the fact that, as you said that, of course, this has the backing of the Kabul government, but it's not its officials that are talking to the Taliban directly, but the Peace Council and other countries like India also have only non-official representation to this, and the US, of course, only in an observer sort of a representation to this. So how does this really play out?
Yes, exactly. You've hit the nail on the head. This is a first step, as Moscow sees it, and an important first step, which seemingly no one else has been able to achieve. But there are key problems that they have to solve if they want to turn this into a meaningful negotiation, not least, of course, a big United States presence, because, as you say, that seems to be a key point that the Taliban are demanding. They have said for many years that they want to negotiate with the US. And ironically, in some ways, it is Russia's energy to try do something different from the United States that could be the problem there, because the US has been reticent about these Moscow-led talks. As you say, they've sent a representative from their embassy, but no strong official US presence. And you sense that to get a substantive answer to the Afghanistan problem, you are going to need the US at the table in their full capacity, you are going to need India at the table in the full capacity, and of course the Afghanistan government, not just the High Peace Council, but the government itself. So Moscow has shown that it can make some progress, but there are big questions still to answer.
Big questions still to answer, but Ambassador Sinha, what can India's involvement at a non-official level really deliver, and what does it really mean to be represented, on a non-official level? Many people here asking, then if that is the case, if we can talk to the Taliban, then why not talk to homegrown terrorists as well?
Well, in the case of India, I think India has participated in it primarily for old time's sake, because Moscow has taken the initiative and our relations with Russia are strong. Therefore, we didn't want to let Russia down. Therefore, the best course of action was to send a non-official delegation. But I think that our position on Afghanistan needs to be updated a bit, taking into account the fact that Afghanistan now has a constitution, it has an electoral process. And apart from just saying that Afghanistan should have a peace process that is Afghan-led or Afghan-owned, we should also insist that the various factions must start participating in the electoral politics. The road to Kabul has to be through the ballot box of the people of Afghanistan, and not through Moscow or Washington or Islamabad or any other country.
Right, so the road to Afghanistan's peace process has to be through the ballot and not the bullet. Ambassador Sinha and Dan Ashby, both, thank you very much indeed for joining us this evening there. Even as the United States and China battle it out over trade, their top diplomats and defense chiefs will be meeting in Washington later tonight, looking to lower tensions on other issues that have put a chill on relations between the two world powers. Now, Secretary of State Mike Pompeo and Defense Secretary Jim Mattis will meet their counterparts Yang Jiechi and Wei Fenghe at the State Department. The talks were due to be held in Beijing last month, but were postponed after Washington announced new arms sales to Taiwan, and the US and the Chinese vessels came close to colliding in the South China Sea. Although the rescheduling of the US dialogue signals an effort by the two sides to contain the slide in the relationship, China clearly views these talks, which will be followed by a joint news conference, as a scene setter for the upcoming meeting between Trump and President Xi. Trump and the Chinese President Xi Jinping plan to meet on the sidelines of the G20 summit, which is being held in Argentina at the end of November and early December. For the high-stake talks, of course, to take place, China and US have put tariffs, meanwhile, on hundreds of billions of dollars of each other's goods, and US President Donald Trump has threatened to set tariffs on the remainder of China's 500 million plus exports to the US if the trade dispute cannot be resolved. But relations between the two countries have warmed slightly since Xi and President Trump spoke by telephone last week, setting the ground for their G20 meeting, it seems.
Thank you, Mr. President, and on behalf of the United States.
Well, back home, Prime Minister Narendra Modi kicked off the campaigning for the upcoming assembly elections in Chhattisgarh. Now, Chhattisgarh state elections are due to take place in two phases on November 12th and November 20th. The results will be declared on December 11th. Prime Minister Modi addressed a rally in Bastar district's headquarters, focusing on development, urging the people of the state to teach a lesson to the Congress leaders, accusing them of supporting Maoists. Simultaneously, in Kanker district, the Congress President Rahul Gandhi kick-started the poll campaign by attacking the Prime Minister over the Rafale deal and demonetization. The campaigning started just a day after Maoists triggered a blast on a bus in the state's Dantewada district, killing 4 civilians and a personnel of the CISF. The Islamic State has claimed responsibility for the Melbourne attack. Now, the development comes just hours after the police said that they are treating the stabbing incident as an act of terror. Police have said that a Somali man who stabbed 3 people in the city drove a car laden with gas cylinders, which caught fire. 1 person has died of the stab wounds. The attacker was shot dead by the police after setting his car alight. Now, the attacker allegedly tossed an explosive device into his own vehicle, setting it ablaze before attacking people on the street. He even tried to knife the police officers.
Police shot the male in the chest, and he is now in a critical condition under guard at hospital. The bomb response unit have cordoned off the area. The MFB have extinguished a vehicle fire. The bomb response unit is now making the scene safe. Police are not looking for any other witnesses or, I beg your pardon, police are not looking for any other offenders at this stage.
Now, it's been just a day after Jeff Sessions, the Attorney General, was sacked in America, but his replacement, the Acting Attorney General Matthew Whitaker, is already playing along with the U.S. President's agenda. The Trump administration has announced that illegal immigrants entering through the southern U.S. border will no longer be eligible for asylum under the new rule called the Interim Final Rule. The proposal further states that presidents have the power to suspend the entry of all migrants and impose any restrictions that the president deems to be appropriate. The caveat is that the ban can only come under effect if the migrants are deemed to be detrimental to the U.S. interests under the Immigration and Nationality Act. Remember, under the U.S. law, there is a legal obligation to hear asylum claims from migrants if they say they fear violence in their countries. Under the international law, these are considered as refugees. But Donald Trump is not welcoming thousands of Central American migrants who are heading towards the U.S.-Mexico border in a bid to enter the U.S. Frequently attacking the migrants, the U.S. president has ordered troops to the border and declared the migrants to be an invasion into the U.S. territory.
Like, you can also leave. Incredible people. And Santa Fe High School in Texas. Same thing.
Well, Michelle Obama has made some surprisingly candid admissions in a forthcoming memoir. She details a rough patch in her marriage and talks about the toughest days she faced while in the White House. But the former First Lady Michelle Obama has also blasted President Donald Trump in her new book. She has written about how she reacted in shock the night she learned he would replace her husband in the Oval Office and tried to quote-unquote block it all out. She also denounces Trump's birther campaign, questioning her husband's citizenship. She calls it bigoted and dangerous. The former U.S. First Lady is about to embark on a book tour titled Becoming: An Intimate Conversation with Michelle Obama. Reflecting on her memoir, Michelle Obama will chronicle the experiences that have shaped her life, from her childhood on the south side of Chicago to her time spent at the White House. In the meanwhile, Michelle Obama's UK fans were left disappointed after tickets of her book tour quickly sold out. They have emerged in secondary ticketing sites for $13,000 each. This translates to almost 9.5 lakh Indian rupees. More than 60,000 rushed to buy the tickets, although the London venue can just seat about 2,700 people. Tickets were sold out within minutes and emerged just hours later on online sites at 50 times the price.